It's my great pleasure now to ask David Kramer to take the stage to award our great friend Vladimir Kara-Murza, recently a guest of Vladimir Putin, an unwilling guest. David needs very little introduction. He's a member of our International Leadership Council. He's the director of the George W. Bush Institute, and perhaps most importantly, I think he exemplifies the tradition of determined engagement in the affairs of Central and Eastern Europe by the US administration. And we didn't realize how lucky we were, David, when we had you in that job. But we're very lucky to have you with us now too. So please join me in welcoming David Kramer.
Edward, thank you very much. I think we have a video first to get us going, so we'll start with that.
Putin fears one thing above all else: defiance. The defiance to disobey, the defiance to hope for peace, the defiance to aspire to a democratic vision for Russia. Journalist, political activist, and vice president of the Free Russia Foundation, Vladimir Kara-Murza embodies the spirit of a free and democratic Russia, and has strived to create a future in which Russians prosper under freedom and democracy, peacefully alongside their neighbours in a Europe that is whole, free, and at peace. Since the collapse of communism, Vladimir and other like-minded Russians have worked to foster democracy and build an alternative political future for Russia, from home and abroad. Through his leadership in securing the passing of the Global Magnitsky Act, Vladimir has ensured that the United States and its democratic partners are able to hold Vladimir Putin and his regime accountable for their human rights violations and attacks against Russia's democratic opposition. After the start of Russia's illegal and unjust war in Ukraine, Vladimir Kara-Murza returned to Russia, knowing the risks to his own personal freedom and safety, to denounce and protest the invasion.
I was convinced that I was going to die in that Siberian prison. I was convinced that I was never getting out, that I would never see my family again, that I would never be able to hug my wife and kiss my children. I would never, ever walk as a free man again. This is what I was convinced of.
The Kremlin has tried to suppress Vladimir's voice with arrest, imprisonment, and have even gone as far as attempts on his life. However, many Russians with the same mission have not survived to fulfill the hope of a better Russia. Through Vladimir's advocacy, the names of Russians like Boris Nemtsov mark streets and plazas near many Russian embassies, and serve as a stark reminder for the Kremlin that their crimes have not defeated Russians' hopes of a better future. Now freed from captivity, Vladimir Kara-Murza has already returned to his mission to stand up to totalitarianism, fight for a better future for Russia, and honor the sacrifice of those who have lost their lives in the pursuit of this cause.
A Russian politician's place is in Russia. It could not have been any other way. I remember well that there was never any question in my mind after both of my poisonings in 2015 and 2017 that I will return to Russia. And I took, I put myself on the plane as soon as doctors allowed me to fly and went back both times for this very reason, because there's no better gift, I think, those of us who are in opposition to Putin can give him than to leave the country.
CEPA is proud to present the Freedom Fighter Award to Vladimir Kara-Murza for his unwavering commitment and unsurpassable dedication to building a free, democratic Russia.
It is a real honor for me to be here tonight, and I want to salute Lena and her amazing team at CEPA for putting together such an array of freedom fighters here this evening, starting with Minister Landsbergis, continuing with Mrs. Zelenskaya, Ms. Sikhanovskaya, and now, of course, Vladimir Kara-Murza. This is a very important occasion to recognize the bravery of all of these people, and one I'm very glad to do in person here rather than simply by video or posthumously. It was Ben Franklin who famously said, It is better 100 guilty persons should escape than one innocent person should suffer. And certainly Vladimir Kara-Murza was an innocent person. There was no reason whatsoever for him to have been imprisoned in Russia, to have been poisoned twice by the Kremlin, other than he was exercising his free rights. You know his story well. He was released as part of an unprecedented prisoner exchange, and credit to the current administration and many other governments and individuals who were involved in that release. Vladimir is a true Russian patriot. He wants a better, peaceful, democratic future for his country, Russia. He is an advocate for holding those responsible for Russia's current state accountable for human rights abuses, violation of neighboring states' borders, and other crimes and genocide against others. It is largely through his advocacy for the Sergei Magnitsky Rule of Law and Accountability Act that Vladimir and I really got to know each other well, along with his very close friend Boris Nemtsov, who tragically was assassinated by Putin in 2015. As I mentioned, Vladimir is a survivor of 2 poisonings for his outspoken criticism of Putin and the Kremlin regime. He was profiled in 60 Minutes. Survivor of 2.5 years in Russian prison. Pulitzer Prize winner, and as I said, a true Russian patriot. But of course, there still are many innocent Russians languishing in Russian prisons today, and I know this weighs on him very seriously. But there is no less important part of Vladimir than the fact that he is a simple human being like the rest of us. He is a son, he's a husband, he's a father, he's also an inspiring friend. I'm relieved and thrilled to see him as a free man. And I'm very happy he's reunited with his family. And I also want to salute Yevgenia for stepping into his shoes and performing brilliantly under the worst conditions possible. Thank you, Yevgenia. This is an honor for me to present to him CEPA's award, the Freedom Fighter Award. Vladimir, please come to the stage.
David, thank you so much for such kind and such warm words. Dr. Polyakova, the whole wonderful team here at CEPA, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends. The word surreal does not even begin to describe what I'm feeling tonight. Just 7 weeks ago, I was sitting in a 2x3 meter cell in solitary confinement in a maximum security prison in Siberia, thinking that this was what the rest of my life was going to look like. And here I am among so many friends in Washington, D.C. Last month's prisoner exchange that saved 16 lives from the hell that is Vladimir Putin's modern-day gulag has shown once again that public opinion matters and that sustained efforts by good people in democratic nations are in the end stronger than any dictatorship can ever hope to be. And the most powerful message sent by the world's democracies in this exchange was to insist that it included not only Western hostages held by Putin, but also Russian political prisoners. That message was loud and clear. The free world knows that the real criminals are those people in the Kremlin who have started this war in Ukraine, not those of us who are imprisoned because we had opposed it. The award
that I am honored beyond words to have received tonight, just a few moments ago, is also a message. In years past, this recognition was bestowed on the courageous representatives of Ukraine, of Belarus, of Moldova, who have been standing tall against dictators to defend the values of freedom and sovereignty and human dignity, to defend the promise of a Europe whole, free, and at peace. Tonight, for the first time, this award is being presented to a Russian citizen. It is a message that is also very loud and very clear. While I'm deeply humbled, as I said beyond words, to be receiving this recognition, I accept it not on behalf of myself, but on behalf of all those people in Russia, on behalf of all my compatriots, on behalf of all my fellow Russian citizens who had the courage and the conviction to stand up to Vladimir Putin and to call out his murderous war in Ukraine in full knowledge of what the price of that stand was going to be. According to publicly available and self-admittedly incomplete counts by human rights groups, more than 20,000 people were detained by police across Russia since February of 2022 for anti-war protests. More than 9,000 were subjected to administrative arrests or penalties, just one step away from criminal prosecution. And more than 1,000 have been criminally indicted, tried, or imprisoned for protesting against this war. These protests have taken different forms. In the case of Alexei Gorinov, a Moscow municipal lawmaker, it was calling for a minute of silence at his council meeting in memory of Ukrainian children killed by Russian bombs. The price was 7 years in prison. In the case of Maria Ponomarenko, a journalist from Siberia, it was reporting honestly about the Russian airstrike on a theater in Mariupol that left hundreds of civilians dead. The price for her was 6 years in prison. In the case of Dmitry Ivanov, a young, talented mathematician who was arrested on the day of his final exam at Moscow State University before he could graduate, it was posting on social media about the war crimes committed by Russian forces in Bucha and elsewhere in Ukraine. The price for him was 8.5 years in prison. And the list goes on. More than 1,300 known political prisoners in Putin's Russia, many more than in the whole of the Soviet Union in its later years. But it's not only the people who are jailed. It is impossible to judge the true state of public opinion in a country that imprisons you for expressing it. But we do sometimes get glimpses into how many Russians actually feel about Putin and about his war. One such glimpse came in February of this year, when, amid the staged circus and the complete unanimity of our so-called presidential election, one candidate tried to run on an anti-war platform. When that happened, the response from the public was unimaginable. That month, nearly every letter I was receiving in prison was about the long lines that suddenly formed in cities and towns across Russia, the long lines of people who wanted to sign the nomination papers to get that anti-war candidate on the ballot. Needless to say, he was barred from running, as opposition candidates invariably are in Vladimir Putin's Russia. But that was almost besides the point. Suddenly, everyone saw through the lie peddled by Putin's propaganda, the lie that all Russians backed his regime, that all Russians supported his war. I will never forget the letter that one young woman wrote to me from the southern Black Sea town of Novorossiysk. After describing how she waited in that long line of like-minded people, mostly young people, to sign the nomination petitions for the anti-war candidate, she ended that letter by saying, "I never realized how many of us there are." This is my Russia, the Russia I love, the Russia I call home. Not the Russia of Vladimir Putin, but the Russia of Boris Nemtsov and Alexei Navalny. Not the Russia of murderers and war criminals who are sitting in the Kremlin, but the Russia of decent and good-hearted people who oppose them. Not the Russia, the archaic, repressive, belligerent Russia of today, but a hopeful, peaceful, democratic Russia of tomorrow. This is the Russia that Vladimir Putin does not want you to see. But with events like this one here tonight, you're sending a very loud and clear message that you know the true worth of the lies coming out from Moscow. That you understand that Russia is not limited by the walls of the Kremlin. And above all, that you recognize that the best promise of long-term security, stability, and democracy on our continent, that the best promise for a Europe that would finally be whole, free, and at peace will be a democratic Russia. I believe in this promise with all my heart. I know many of you do too. Let us work together to make that promise a reality. Thank you very much.